Hello everyone, welcome back to the last video of 2025. This is crazy, we're going into the new year, this is it. And today we're gonna finish in a positive one because I'm gonna be talking about the best books that I read this year, including some of the biggest surprises. And yeah, as I talked in a very recent video, going over the books that I read for my 2025 priority list or TVR, I mentioned that I focused a lot on two specific series, that those being Malazan, Book of the Fallen, and The Age of Madness. So because of that, I actually did not get to as many books, I think, as in previous years, or at least a big chunk of the books I read this year were focused in those series. So I think making these lists of best and worst books of the year was maybe easier. There was kind of less books to choose from, and I also wanted to pick only one out of big series. So yeah, maybe without any further ado, let me look into my notes. Let's see. So I'm gonna be starting with the surprises, just because that's a bit fun, and then we'll leave the best books for the end of the video. So okay, so the first surprise that I'm going to be talking about is the La Mala Costumbre, and I forgot the name of the author, but this is fiction written by and about a trans woman living in a kind of middle income, middle class neighborhood somewhere in Spain. And this is a book that I think got very popular in Book Talk or the bookish internet. I think the translation is called Bad Habits or Bad Habit. And I was a bit hesitant to read it because of that, and not wanting to go into the hype train. But this got picked up by local book club that I like, and so I just read it with them, and it was such a beautiful story. This story follows a young girl from the moment she's like a small kid all the way until her adulthood, and how she discovers who she really is. Some of the beautiful things about this discovery, and a lot of the hardships as well, because she grew up in a family in Spain, and I think it was I don't know which time in history this is put into, but maybe around the 70s or something. But anyways, it's a very traditional family in Spain, and so there's a lot of stereotypes and gender norms and things that she, growing up or being assigned male at birth, was expected to do. But then I would say by the end of her journey, she realizes that she doesn't need to stick to those conventions, and this process was just such a joy to read. I think I, coming from Mexico, could empathize with a lot of what she was going through. And there's this group of older trans people that she meets that become kind of her mentors, and it was just so pure seeing how she finds acceptance and understanding and community in this group of women. And yeah, I don't know, I thought this was beautifully told. It's not overly dramatic or exaggerated. I think it's true to the author's story, probably in some ways, and universal in a lot of other ways. I think the even though it's a story about a trans woman, and I am not a trans woman, I saw myself reflected way more than I thought I would. So yeah, this was just a beautiful story. And the second one that I'm going to talk about as a surprise is going to be Ursula K. Le Guin's Left Hand of Darkness. And I was surprised that I liked this so much because I read her first, or the first book that I read from her was a big miss for me. That was The Lathe of Haven, a very short novella. And I thought at the time that her writing was very dry, and even though the story or the premise was very interesting, I could not connect to the character. And I was just a bit afraid that that would be the case with The Left Hand of Darkness. And fortunately, that was not the case. I do think the dryness part of her writing style is there, but I think because she had way more space. I mean, Left Hand of Darkness is a much a full length novel. I did not care about it so much, and I had so much more time to get to know these characters and feel for their story. And yeah, this follows a kind of emissary of the Empire who is sent to this planet that in their language is called just Winter. And in this planet, there are um, two big, I would say, civilizations, or two big, like, city states, at least from what we see in the book. And the story focuses mostly in one of them, and it's a society where people here are not like fixed to a gender, but rather they change every like couple of weeks, and it's kind of completely random. So, and then the rest of the time they basically are like genderless. So it's a story that touches a lot on like gender norms, but as I mentioned briefly in a recent video, it's so much more than just this. This is like the theme that I think is what people know the most about The Left Hand of Darkness, but I think it touches so much on like kinship and like uh, sisterhood and brotherhood and community, which those were all very surprising themes, I think, that I discovered in this story. And the world building is fascinating. The way these two city states operate and interact with each other was just fascinating to read. And there are a couple of beautiful lines. I think Le Guin has a way of writing like the most quotable lines, I find, and there are some of them that are just shocking in how like brief and powerful they are. I think with a couple of words, not even like multiple sentences, but she's able to pack so much truth into her stories. And I think some of these quotes that like ring or like that hit home the most have to do with like belief and truth, and then also like what is the value of the meaning of life. There is this whole like subplot, or not a subplot, but there's this part of the story where the main character, he basically finds this community of like fortune tellers ish, and they have this conversation about destiny and like the certainties that we have in life and what that represents to the way we live life. Anyways, Left Hand of Darkness was such a beautiful tale. I loved it at the start. I loved it like through. There's a lot of like journeying, and usually I don't like this kind of just walking around stories. But in this case, I thought the way that the main character deconstructs his own kind of belief system and his place in also like the broader universe. I mean, he's just here as an outsider, and in this society, he who is kind of fixed to a single gender is seen as a monstrosity, like something to be kind of. I think people are almost disgusted by his kind of biology, and I think that is so interesting because I mean we have such a like a human centric view on like ecology and like our interaction to nature, and yet there are so many things in nature that are so different to how humans operate, and we can view those as like alien to us, but they are just as much part of nature as we are. So I think there is such a beautiful discussion about our place in kind of this shared space that we called home. And yeah, beautiful themes, beautiful writing. Cannot wait to read more from Le Guin. And with that being said, let's just move on to the best books that I read in 2025. And I'm just going to be talking about three in maybe no particular order. And the first one is going to be the second book in the Age of Madness by Joe Abercrombie, and this is The Trouble with Peace. Joe Abercrombie just manages to write amazing like second books in trilogies. I don't know why, but like it was a case with both the First Law trilogy and also the Age of Madness, and even the standalone trilogy, which is I guess not really a full or like a normal trilogy, but also the second one was my favorite one. And yeah, I think this is where we got to see the characters develop the most and really like come into their kind of purpose in the story. I think Rike in particular, she like daughter of Dogman, was one of my favorite ones. I always loved the fantastical elements in the First Law world. I know they're not huge and they're not like super frequent, but they are I think, always so mysterious, and I love soft magic systems when used properly. And so Enrique's character development and how she like unfurls into this witch person was amazing to see. Um, and I will not spoil more about that, but I think that was definitely a standout. I think Abercrombie has this way of playing with your expectations, because usually we have these narrative arcs where the second acts are a lot of like setup and people getting to the place they need to be for like the big final battle. And I always feel like Abercrombie's battles in the second books are way more like interesting, and they set up, I think, what is to come, but not in a way that is like, these characters just needed to be here so that it would make sense in the third book, but rather like character changing moments. And really, I also think about like Leo or Leon, I think, yeah, Leo, and really like the change in his character that we see through book two it came out of nowhere for me, and I think it was why it makes, and I think it is what makes Age of Madness being loved. I mean, so much, even more sometimes, I think, than the first law. So yeah, I think definitely book two was my favorite out of the three, and I have a video talking more about this, and I will link you to that. But I had a lot of fun. I think this is a video that like opens up a lot of the kind of politicalness just beyond kind of the castle, because I felt like book one was too like geographically limited to like a small town and a bit of what we see in a city, but it felt a bit isolated. And I think in book two we really get to see how some of these like factions across the continent interact with each other, and again, like the characters growing into their full kind of personas, I think was what made it the best for me. And yeah, I also like the third one, but I think the second one was for sure my favorite. The second book that I will talk about now is no surprise to anyone who has been watching my videos, and that is Temporada de Huracanes by Fernanda Belchor, a Mexican author and journalist from Veracruz. And this book took me by surprise, and I loved it. It's such a tough book because it narrates a feminicide in a small town in Mexico. And as I've mentioned in multiple videos now at this point, and what really stuck to me from this book is this realization of how millions of people in Mexico, and I'm sure this happens in many places, have been abandoned by the government, by institutions, by society, by other people, and left kind of to their own devices. And you see the interactions of the people in this town, some of them with a lot of like care and kindness, and how they take care of each other, but also how like some of these lawless towns that again are forgotten and are kind of left to the margins of society, how they rot and they develop into these like crooked, ruptured, uh, unfunctional amalgamation of people. And each of the chapters in the story is narrated by someone else, and we get to see a bit of their backstory and how they connect to this central character, this woman that was assassinated at the start of the book, La Bruja, like the witch. Uh, I like witches. There's a theme here, and yeah, I think learning how this witch character is the center of the community in multiple ways. In like both are ironic ways, but also like truly tragic ways. I think, yeah, what can I say? Like this book has so much force, and I'm so glad that it has found like resonance in international audiences as well. This is translated and it's called Hurricane Season in English. So if you can tolerate like all kinds of violence and you know, people not taking care of each other, if that is something that you can tolerate right now, I would really recommend you reading this, and I think it will make you reflect a lot on people that need our help. And I will stop there. And last but not least, I of course need to talk about The Crippled God, which is the last book, the last book in Malazan, the Book of the Fallen, at least the main, or like Steven Eriksson's main 10-book series. This is the culmination of a huge project. Like these 10 books are in total, I mean, if I think if you compare it with the average length of a book, it's about like 40 books, more than 10, because these are chunkers. And I am so happy to say that The Crippled God is a very, very satisfactory conclusion. I loved especially like the last two chapters were like 6 hours to read in total, and it's just like a non-stop epic kind of last, um, I don't want to say like it's not, it's obviously there's a battle, like this is military fantasy, so there's a lot of battles throughout, but there are so many character moments that culminate 10 books worth of like journeys and character development and thematic build up. And yeah, this is such a fascinating project, and I would do no justice to these books if I try to talk everything that I need to say in this one video. So I will not do that. I have an upcoming video just talking about Malazan in general, but I am very happy to report that The Crippled God is one of the best books that I read this year, and probably like in my life, just because of the scale of it, and not just the scale in terms of like complexity and the length of this series, but also what it really achieves, what it manages to say about humanity and people and our relationship to each other, our relationship with belief and you know, believing in bigger powers, what like morality, what is right to do, what is worth doing. uh, it's just such a beast, and I am so glad. Like I could not like I think I was up late reading at like 1 in the morning trying to finish the book, and those are just like the best experiences when you cannot like put the book down and are reading the last words in a big like project. So yeah, what else can I say in this short video? I really liked it. I think it left. Obviously, I knew it would leave a lot of threads open because Steven Erikson is not a conventional author, and this series is not conventional in any way. And so I knew that some of the things would not be resolved, but I think we got enough resolution to, you know, main plot lines. And I think even the things that didn't get resolved, there's a lot of thematic resolution. So yeah, it's not a perfect series for sure. It's not a series for everyone, but damn, this is such a series that is worth reading. And I am so happy that I actually got to this. So next year, I think I will be prioritizing other things, and I'm very happy that I'm done with Malazan. But yeah, Crippled God, check, done. One of the best reading experiences of the year. And yeah, with that being said, thank you so much for watching these. And yeah, I wish you all a happy end of the year and a great start to this 2026. And yeah, have a good one. Bye bye.